Day one was really awesome. I couldn't have asked for a better lineup and flow of speakers, but we started with the why, we hit the what, and then we talked about what right looks like. Today we're going to be talking about how you do it, but not at a team practitioner level, but at the programmatic level, because this is federal after all. So how do we hack the bureaucracy? I told everyone here that regardless of your position, even if you're an individual contributor, first and foremost, you're a bureaucracy hacker. And we all have to come together to hack bureaucracy at the programmatic level. It's not just down at the level of like, hey, I'm a designer and they're not letting me talk to my users. I've got to figure out how to talk to my users. You do have to do that too, right? But you're also going to have to help your procurement team apply service design to the procurement process. And I can tell you, even Kessel Run, near and dear to my heart, love Kessel Run, obviously, came from there, helped found it. Still, there's a lot of improvement that can be done in the procurement process. And where are our balanced teams? We talked about balanced teams for building products, but where are our balanced teams for platform? Where's our balanced teams for procurement, for budgeting? All of these problems that we have, they're the actual ceilings on your growth. You can only do individual contributing and ship products for so long before you can't actually accomplish the mission, because you can't go high enough. And we got to figure out how to go higher. We have to figure out how to rise. So super excited for today, getting into some of those hows, lots of bureaucracy hacking talk. We do have a slight change. Max Reele is going to go first, and then retired Admiral Richardson. I am super excited for this one. If you don't know, Gene puts on a DevOps Enterprise Summit and a DevOps Enterprise Forum. And in the forum, folks write research papers. And he added a federal track a couple of years ago. And this year, the topic was, how do we organize federal for success, for software success specifically? And so Max was a part of that team, and he is going to present some of their research findings. Max Reele was one of the original Kessel runners. He helped build and deploy our worldwide platform. Then he went to Bespin and started Bespin. Then came back to Kessel Run as the deputy commander and the material leader. Super excited to have him on stage. Max Reele.
Thanks, Bryon. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me. So it's definitely a privilege to be here. It's really hard to be speaking in front of a room of everyone who knows my job and probably knows how I should be doing my job. It's an exciting venue to be at, specifically because this feels like quite a bit of a reunion. The entire process of working at Kessel Run and then over to Bespin and then back to Kessel Run has been quite an immersion, a journey into tech. As we all kind of learned, most of us who grew up through labs experience, they'd always ask you, what's your journey into tech? And so I say that just to say, I think I'd like to open by just thanking everybody who's here that has been a part of my journey. It's incredible to see so many people that have touched Kessel Run at some point throughout their career, and now they're all here at this venue. And the reason you're at this venue is because you care so much about continuously learning, to be intense about what we're doing, to be intense about delivering against mission effectiveness. And that's the whole reason that this crew is here. And yesterday, the talking points around every single speaker that got up here had the talking points around us not being alone. We're all here together. So while each one of these software factories is all working towards their own mission slice and effectiveness within that mission slice, we frequently are pitted against each other. But the people in this room are here to not be pitted against each other. We're here to work together to make sure that we can all successfully continue delivering into prod, or it didn't happen, right? So that being said, I am currently, of course, at Kessel Run. This brief in itself is not a Kessel Run brief. So for everyone here that has lived and worked in Kessel Run, you can critique me about how Kessel Run is going anytime you'd like. I'm always happy to have those conversations. For everyone who is currently a Kessel runner, I'm here to represent you, so please feel free to continue to critique me on how things are going at Kessel Run. Everyone who's a former Kessel runner, we are okay with people coming back to Kessel Run. In fact, I am a repeat offender, as Bryon said in the intro, and I'd love it if I get a chance to continue to work with many of you again in whatever capacity you choose. All right, so here's the flow of everything that I'm going to go through in the pitch today. Specifically, the conversation that we're having is around a topic that I've been working really dedicated with the team. That not in the picture is also Trent Hone, who is a part of our team that has been working really diligently at the body of research that we've put together starting last March with the DevOps Enterprise Summit. So what I'd say is we're here for peer review. Gene kind of let out a teaser about this yesterday during his talk, and we are really interested in hearing exactly what people think about these concepts, and as you exercise these concepts, telling us how that's going so that we can continue to evolve the process and our learnings here. We've already done quite a bit of peer review, but never on this wide of a scale, and so you see some of the people listed there, both government and industry professionals, as well as the DevOps Enterprise Summit community has taken a look at our work so far. And so we've received some feedback and done iterations, but we're still in a massive curve on the learning phases of these concepts. So please, let's put them into practice. The real inspiration for this work, though, is when I was sitting at DevOps Enterprise Summit. It was virtual, so I was sitting in front of my iPad logged in. But we started to share the stories across all the people that were part of the government representation that were in our small group forum together. And as we were sharing those stories, I was reflecting on my experience at Kessel Run, then at Bespin, then back at Kessel Run, and having helped many other software factories, Kobayashi Maru, and even non-software factories, but innovation organizations trying to stand up, like Tesseract or you name it. And having helped every single one of those organizations and been a part of the organizations I was in, I couldn't get past, why am I so tired all the time? Why am I pushing a rock up a hill all the time? Why does it feel like we're fighting bureaucracy all the time? Why does it feel like we're fighting the system instead of fighting to make the system better, to make the system successful? And I know it's cathartic to all like vent about that every time we get together. And sure, that feels great, but it doesn't help us actually get the rock over the hill so we can stop pushing it. But what I found at DevOps Enterprise Summit with Gene and our small group that we had pulled together was that everybody was having these shared experiences. And so the epiphany that I had was that the system itself is not set up to actually give us a chance for success. And that's how we started to organize around these critical variables. Frequently, the cathartic sessions that we have with people who are trying to run innovation or digital transformation within the government sector is people are saying, I can't get the right talent in-house. And you guys are Kessel Run, like you have the riches of talent. You guys have so many people, right? You've got people coming direct from industry. And yes, that's true, but still we're all capped by the way that the government handles recruiting and how long the hiring process takes and how much you can pay employees. Like all of that is still very real. And those things take years to try and make a difference on. So we know that talent management and bringing in the right talent is one of the critical variables to having an incredibly strong team. But it's not one that internal to your team you have much control over in terms of policy, because you're going to have to deal with the personnel management staffs of your higher services or government agencies to be able to make real significant progress there. The other is resourcing and funding. We all in the government follow the government budgeting process, which is if you're unfamiliar, it's 3 years to get something funded that you actually think is an important priority. 3 years from the time that you put that into a budget submission until it actually comes out and has been approved as the official, in our case, DoD budget for you to execute those funds. So again, that's not a variable that we can change very quickly. And then there's, of course, the policy and requirements process that allows us to do the work that we set out to do. If you work on something that is an official program with appropriated funds from Congress, you can only work on requirements for that program. That's why I bring up this point. It's so critical that you're actually working against a requirement that's been levied to you by your requirements owners. And that's the only way we get to do the work that we want to do. So while that sounds really bureaucratic and awful, there are strides that are happening in that area to make us more successful at managing a more nimble requirements process. It's absolutely essential. Like, we need it. And sometimes the boring stuff is what we have to invest our time into, like the requirements process, to make sure that we can be doing things better. So of those top 3 variables that I just talked about, all of them are years-long processes to make any sort of significant change. But what we found in talking through all the organizations that we were with and talking with some of the leaders who have done a better job at enabling their teams for success is that these bottom two variables seem to be pretty powerful and seem to have an amount of time associated with them where you can actually make a difference on a much smaller time scale than the years that it takes to impact any of the prior three variables. So with that being said, what we're suggesting here from a hypothesis standpoint is the government is making a lot of strides to try and improve the speed of delivery. The government recognizes that us getting capabilities into the field to continue to be a formidable force against all of our peers and adversaries, near peer adversaries, is something that needs to be improved upon. So from the previous slide, there was all these like different policies and initiatives that were going on to help us improve our speed and how quick, how agile we can be at adjusting to changing requirements and changing operations in warfare. Yeah, that's all true. And so what we're recognizing is that while they're making efforts to change the big variables that the system thinks are the most important variables, there's a little bit of neglect to some of the easier variables that we can actually get after. And so the quote that you see up there, not to pander, sir, but the quote that you see up there is actually from Admiral Richardson, who's going to follow up this discussion. And it was part of the inspiration and the awakening for what we're doing here. That's why it shows up on the hypothesis slide for what we're actually trying to prove out. While we were talking to Admiral Richardson about our white paper and about the direction we were taking with the white paper, we were still in the real infant stages. We didn't know exactly what we were getting to in terms of a thesis. And so we were talking about how to organize teams for the best chance for success, and Admiral Richardson was accounting to us all the problems he has with the procurement system. And a lot of the talk yesterday was about how troubled procurement systems are, and Bryon happened to attack me in the intro about Kessel Run's procurement. I get it. The acquisition process is awful. But my response to Admiral Richardson there was, well, the acquisition community, the popular refrain from the acquisition community is going to be, we let DoD instruction 5000.87, software acquisition pathways. We respect software. We respect your tight little loops in software. We respect all that now. Look, it's in our graphics. It's in our documents. It's in an official DoDI. And Admiral Richardson got a little bit frustrated with me when I said that that was what the acquisition community would posit back to him. And it was a real moment when you have the former chief of naval operations like stick his finger up at you and say like, but you're not organized for it. You're not organized to be successful. You can put all the policy you want into place that you think is going to let your teams move faster, but all you've done is add more policy to the bureaucracy that already exists. That's not execution, but you're not organized for it. And so that got us thinking in this small group, at least it got me thinking very clearly, what are the ways that we can actually organize our teams to be more successful? Okay, so that being said, we looked for a simple set of variables that are ready to be influenced today. So whether you're the leader of some of these teams that are trying to do DevSecOps or DevOps and trying to field capability to your mission users right now, or you are on a product team yourself trying to be somebody who fields, look at it from both of those angles. Please put yourself in both of those seats. How would you enable your teams? You are the leader on your team. You are the leader of your own work. How would you enable your team to be successful? So here, let's get into the variables that we think we can impact and we can have control over today. Closeness to mission outcomes. We fought with how to name this, but the actual name of the variable itself is less relevant. What is really relevant is where you can fit. So as you think about whether you're the leader of a team or you're on your team, try and decide which one of these 4 bullet points you think you sit in right now for the teams that you're trying to enable to be successful or for yourself on your team. Do you have unfettered access to your end users? Are you in your users' operational environment regularly where you know exactly what they're going through and you can start to predict what their next needs are because you feel that with them? Or are you on the other side of the spectrum where you actually have to go through like an operational user representative that's managed by some staff agency or like a user proxy to actually get to understand what the users think. So somebody's translating the user's feedback for you. You never even get to talk to the end user. You might not even know any of their names, not a single one of their names. If that's the case, you're on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so there's a continuum. And the reason I show this graphic off to the side is because when we first started to harvest this data, we had it completely blank. We didn't want to tell people what's the right answer here. There is no right answer. The bottom line is this is just an objective assessment about where you are or where your teams are right now. So figure out which bullet you fit into, and then what you see there with the sticky notes is like that's literally how raw it was when we pulled this data. And so I thank everyone in the room who's part of the Software Factory Coalition. But I just put this up on the screen, and I asked everyone, put your team name on a sticky note and come pop it up on the screen where you think your team exists on these different variables. And then let's have a debate about where you actually, where you fit and why you fit there and what that actually feels like. So here's some of the testimonials we got. Like, do we think closeness to mission outcomes is an important variable? These testimonials will tell you it absolutely is. It cannot be ignored. It cannot be ignored. So if you're somewhere where you have low proximity to your mission outcomes, that conversation piece that I just said, where you may not even know the names of any of your users because you never get to directly talk to them, here are some of the testimonials out of the 30+ software development organizations that we talked to on how some of the people living within those systems felt. And I will commit to everybody in this room, none of these quotes come from any Kessel runners. So please don't hold me accountable for that. But listen to this. We ship things but don't know if they work? What? We ship things but don't know if they work? You don't even know if what you just put out there in feature land is something that's working for your end user or not? Like, that is obviously a problem. Why is it that our leaders would be okay with this? Me, as a leader within Kessel Run, could I possibly imagine that one of my product teams is putting something out there on the street and we're not even sure if it's working? So please, don't allow yourselves to think that this variable is trivial. This is incredibly important. And I get it. This is all underpinned by UCD, and everybody in this room believes in UCD, but there's just so much more to it. Whether or not you're executing DevOps or even some other form of software delivery, even if you're in a waterfall process, we're talking about proximity to your mission outcome. How close are you to the person who has to execute the mission for the tool that you're building? And then secondarily, if you look at the far other side of the spectrum, you can see how refreshing it is to be set up for success where you're actually embedded in your user's environment. The one that I bolded here, we can anticipate the needs based on past experience and knowledge of the context that our users are operating in. So you're so close with your users, you're so embedded with your users that you can start to see their pain points before they're even able to vocalize their pain points. Now we're talking about like in-app feedback. You can see them clicking around. You can see where the frustration is, where they can't move forward to the next page. All those types of things. And you know their mission so well that you understand why they're getting stuck there. How refreshing is that? You can start to iterate on your product and build new designs based on what you see the user going through before they're even able to vocalize it to you or before they even have to. So very different ends of that spectrum. Next variable, lines of authority. How many bosses do you have? How many people do you have to pander to? I frequently have quoted that my job now, I'm so far from product that it hurts my soul. I don't get to drive product strategy anymore. I don't get to be on teams. I don't get to be a part of hearing what is the current blockers of the day. I don't get to be making calls and fighting with DISA. I'm a professional stakeholder manager at this point in time. We have so many people roll through. We have so many bosses that we have to answer to. And I'm not saying this in the most negative sense ever. Our organization needs that. So I'm doing what is necessary for our organization at this point in time, but I don't love it. And why do we need professional stakeholder managers? Because we have so many bosses that we have to answer to. And so this lines of authority becomes a really important variable to understand how many people do I have to get to say yes for me to ship something into prod. And if you can define that however you want, like from obviously a very technical case when we're talking about shipping actual code to prod, there's facts there. How many organizations do I have to get through to get this actual code into prod? Do I have to fight with DISA to get something whitelisted just to get this into prod? DISA is not even my organization. They're not even in my service. I got to call somebody else in a totally different service. You probably get through 3 or 4 people just to be on the phone with the right person. So from a technical perspective, the number of things you have to get through to get your code into prod is important, but this also has a lot more to do with the business operations and the human operations. So getting something into prod is about enabling your team to be successful at getting something into prod, which means they've been resourced appropriately, they have the authority to do some hiring to get the right talent in, they have the authority to spend some money to get the right contracts in place or to buy the right IT tools, or they have the right cybersecurity authorities through their approving official to put those SaaS tools into the environment that they're going to use for development. All of those things matter, because until those things are in place, your team doesn't have a chance to exercise the way that they need to be successful. So how many bosses do you have? How many lines of authority do you have to get through to be successful at getting your thing in the prod? And here's the trade space of variable of feasible choices within that trade space that we ask people to score themselves against. Do you have a single arbiter for all of your outcomes? A single arbiter within your organization that can say, like, yes, you can spend that money, yes, you can hire that person, yes, you can ship that code, yes, I own that production environment, so from an IT ops perspective, you're allowed to ship, and that's going to go live in ops for your end user. If there's one person there that's actually in your organization, that's what this success looks like. That's what we're talking about, is like the successful side of the trade space of this variable. Now, having 4+ authorities to earn a yes from, that's not unheard of. I actually believe I have more than that. I think I have more people that I need to say yes than even 4. But I think 4 is where we capped it on the I'll call it negative side. I don't want to try and add any weighting to the connotation of whether or not you're in a good place or a bad place, but what I mean is it's much more difficult to execute your job if you're having to get a separate approval for your acquisitions, you're having to get a separate approval for your hiring, you're having to talk to a totally separate governing body to get through test, a totally separate governing body to be able to execute in your operational environment, especially if you move up classification levels, and you're having to manage multiple environments. So what does that look like? Here are the testimonials of people living within that system. So if you have your lines of authority are fragmented and you have multiple bosses that you have to go through, you start to experience things like this over on the left. This is the testimonials from the humans living within that system. Product leaders must make decisions not just based on what's good for the mission, but to pander to the needs of many bosses. I live that on a daily basis. I'm a professional stakeholder manager. I'm pandering to the bosses, not in a negative way, but because that's what's needed for our teams to be successful. But should that be true? Shouldn't we all get to work on the capabilities that we care about to be delivering against mission outcomes? If you don't get to work on that because you're having to pander to many bosses, and those bosses aren't bad people, like assume the noble intent. They're trying to solve hard problems for their teams, but every single one of them has some function that they exist for. And it hasn't been empowered down at the team level. It still exists somewhere up in a governing body. So you become a panderer to that governing body. It's just a necessary part of the bureaucracy. But it slows everything down. That coordination cost is immense. That's what everything on the left represents, people living within that system. And like I said earlier, these quotes do not come from anything from my personal experience. These are all from people that we interviewed as a part of this research. And then on the right, what does it look like when this is frictionless? When you truly are empowered across everything that has to happen to be a successful DevOps team. When you're truly empowered, this is how it makes humans within that system feel. People with the right knowledge make the right decisions at the right time. They feel like they can execute exactly what's necessary for their team to be successful as soon as they know as a team that they validated that that's the direction they want to go. They no longer have to go through the multiple lines of coordination to get there, to get to getting their capability in the field. So here's the real power and the simplicity of what this 2x2 looks like. On the vertical axis and on the horizontal axis, you can see the exact variables that I just went through. And we went through them in a deeper state because I know Gene put out the teaser yesterday, but I wanted to try and deliver here some level of impact for how deeply we investigated these variables and where you can be living within the trade space of feasible choices that exist. So we talked about the left bounds and the right bounds, but there's certainly an in-between, and most people live somewhere in the in-between. So please take a second, like I said, as you're evaluating where you are with your current teams or where you have set your teams up if you're a leader, and think about exactly where those teams exist. And then you can look at the cross-section. And the cross-section is what's important. That's why I don't have any data points on this. Because when we put data points up there, everyone just wants to care about where they are. Where's my dot? And where's the dot of everyone else? Where's Kessel Run's dot? Everyone in here who's had experience with Kessel Run wants to know, like, how awful is Kessel Run? Like, it's really fun to talk about how bad things are screwed up at Kessel Run, right? So let's see how bad off they are there. I'm just using that as a cheeky example. But what I mean is, I don't have data on here because I really want to show the power of what this cross-section means, the power of the variables themselves when they come together. So think about where you fit once you actually do the 2x2, and think about where you want to be. So if you wind up in the top right, do you think that means your team is crushing it? Or what have we really figured out here? If you're in the top right because you have frictionless lines of authority, you get to make all the decisions that your team needs to be able to effectively push into prod and get your capabilities in your users' hands. That also means that you have proximity to your mission outcome. You're embedded with your users. You know exactly what they're sensing and feeling every day, and you can predict their pain points. You should be crushing it. No. That means you're just given the opportunity to be crushing it. You're now given the privilege of accountability. You're organized for success. That's what this means. So if you wind up in the top right because you know exactly how important these variables are and you demand it of your leadership that you be set up for success, you now know exactly what to ask them to get you into the top right. Now you have the privilege of accountability. Now you can say, all right, we're gonna unleash the true power of our engineering efforts here. And we're going to let our teams, working directly with our users, start pumping capability out into the field. And now it's on us. Now we're accountable. Now it's on us to prove that we are what we say we are, that we are going to be as good as we say we are for our users to start meeting those mission outcomes. If you're not in the top right, what does that tell you? In juxtaposition to having the privilege of accountability, if you are in the top right, everywhere else that you are within this, you can read the captions that we have for each of the quadrants that exist. It's not to define exactly where you are. It's made to hopefully make you aware of what you need to be asking of your leaders. And not just asking of them, almost demanding of them. If I were to come in here and have any of my teams or me go to any of our leadership and say, we have too many lines of authority that we have to get through. Our coordination cost is way too high for us to be able to be responsive to our users' changing operational needs. So I need you leaders to reduce my lines of authority that I have to get to. Also, I haven't been able to talk to our users in a month. Why haven't I talked to our users in a month? I need way less friction between me and the users. So I need to demand of my leaders to say, get all of these blockers, these staff agencies or user proxies or whatever they are, get them out of the way. Bring them along with us. They can come and sit with the users with us so they can observe how this works. But I need direct access to my users. You now know what to ask for. And if you're not getting what you need, then you're not set up to be accountable. So your popular refrain to your boss should always be, sure, you can get on me all the time about how are we doing with delivery, how are we doing at meeting our outcomes, but the bottom line is I'm not in control of that. You haven't organized me for success yet. So we need to be relentless about asking our leaders to understand these variables. The whole reason that we're pitching this is because we found that these are two variables that can be impacted today. As leaders, they have control over these two variables right now. Okay. So I was going to get to a point where I am going to show you the actual data points. And Gene put out a teaser yesterday anyway, so I know everybody has already seen the graph with the data points put on it. But what I really want to emphasize is that the data point doesn't matter. The data points that we're going to look at on the graph, when I put them up, they don't matter. Unless you're looking at you, like your specific data point is what matters. Where you are relative to anybody else on the graph, that doesn't matter. What matters is exactly where your dot is, or where the dot is of the team that you're the leader for. And how do you move that dot? By being able to play with the mixture of these variables to get that powerful cocktail right to the sweet spot. So success is not reaching the top right like we talked about. That's just where you earn the privilege of accountability so that you are poised for success at that point in time. All right, here's the data. Let's take a look. Of course, the data points are not labeled, and everyone can offer conjecture about what they think is in what place and what software factory is where. But what I can tell you by the breakout of the key, if you look at it, the versions that have been put out previously didn't have this. But we did break it apart based on what teams are executing DevOps primarily, what teams are using traditional methods, primarily waterfall, and what teams that we interviewed either are a mixture of both or maybe we're not quite certain. And so that's what you see in the color-coded key. And that's fairly telling, because what we're able to notice here is that because of the principles of DevOps that we've all subscribed to, the teams that are executing DevOps tend to be organized for a better chance for success. They tend to be able to be in a place where they can be held accountable today. You're already in a place where you should have the ability to be delivering. And I think that's because we so closely subscribe to things like UCD, which means we're already knowing how important it is to be with our users and have constant contact with our users, even if that means like frequent recurrence with our users, not embedded, but frequent recurrence, because that's just the very next step down. And then teams that are executing waterfall, think of like the software engineering groups, and that's not to clown on them. They have an important job and they do that job. But what I mean is the way that is structured, the way that they're organized, is they sit at the software engineering group and they basically are never talking to the end users. There's functionals from that user community, like a logistician who has done their entire career on the flight line, will then come and sit embedded at the software engineering group. So they get a user proxy, and that user proxy sits with them and helps them develop their software for what the user is going to need. But the bottom line is the day that person walked off the flight line, they're not a user anymore. They're a user proxy, because they're not the actual user of the system anymore. So that's where you wind up in the bottom left, because they have to work through a user proxy. They're using waterfall methods. So they have a lot of lines of authority to get through, different cybersecurity approvals, different test approvals, different financial approvals, and so they have also many lines of authority to get through, a lot of coordination cost to get something into production. So this is the data points. The two that show a connection through a line, there's something really important there too. Now we can start to see the system in motion. And so where you see those two different examples, that is the same organization with two different use cases. And so they're in two different places at the same time, meaning, I'll tell you quickly why, because they're both for different reasons. One is mission specific. So in terms of mission specificity, as long as they're doing a benign mission, I'll just say, they're in the top right quadrant. But as soon as they're doing a mission that involves something having to do with more critical nature or human safety, then you wind up having an extra line of authority that you have to get through. Somebody else has to approve you being able to put that system into production and for ops acceptance. So they move left based on mission specificity if they're working on something that involves human safety. The other one that is connected is a totally separate reason. That's because of an IT ops dependency that they inherit. So depending on what network they're pushing to prod in, because they have multiple prod environments that they're moving their capabilities into, they're in the top right quadrant as long as they're pushing to the environment they're in control of. And they have production in that environment too for many of their users. But there's a separate carve out of their user subset that has to go to a separate network, because that's how we do things in the government. And they have to get an entirely separate approval to get into that network. So when they're pushing to their other prod, their more exquisite prod, they actually have to move into the more bureaucratic quadrant, because they need they have an additional line of authority to have to get through, an additional approval step to be able to get into production. So this just shows the power of how those small changes can really impact where your organization sits and your ability to essentially be held accountable for your own performance. If I'm in the top left, for example, I'm saying you have me set up with my users. I understand what my users need, but I have way too many people to have to get through to get what I need to my users. So you should be demanding, reduce those lines of authority. I shouldn't need a separate approval to get to a separate prod, for example. So here are the learnings applied. We've talked mostly about this already, but what I'm really asking for is if everyone here can start to apply these principles, and I'll boil it down like really simply. If you don't feel like you have frictionless lines of authority, you don't feel like you can control when you push into prod and how you get your capability to your end user, or if you can bring a new tool in that you know your team needs to be able to executing your mission, ask your leadership to fix that for you. Be relentless about it. Ask your leadership to fix that for you. And then you'll start to see what your leadership is really made of. Because are they going to respond by saying, 2 months from now, show up at an architecture review board, let me see if that new tool is something that we can bring into our environment. Maybe 6 months from now, you'll get to use that tool. If that's their response, they're not really excited about reducing your coordination costs. They're not excited about reducing your lines of authority to help you get to a successful place where you can deliver into prod. So this is a way to hold yourselves accountable for, am I asking for what I need to be successful, to be organized for success? And it's a way to hold your leadership accountable for, are they going to walk the walk? Everyone says they're all in on innovation. Everyone says they're all in on wanting faster delivery speeds. So are they going to organize you to be able to execute that? And you'll get to really get a sense. And I'm not saying this so that we can bash on our leadership. I'm saying this because Gene's quote yesterday that he used 2 separate times, if there's a dope at the top, there's going to be dopes all the way down. We don't want to work for dopes. And anybody who's at the top I don't think I'm a dope, but I know I've done wrong for teams within Kessel Run and Bespin and everywhere else. And so I want to be informed about decisions I can make that will better enable teams. And we all, as leaders, everyone here is a leader of your own work within your teams. You want to be informed about what decisions you can make to set your teams up for greater success. So put the concepts into practice. Please relentlessly hold yourselves and your leadership accountable for these easy decisions that can be made today to organize for success. And then let's roll it back through. Let's see, with the system in motion, if more of the teams wind up being successful as they've executed against this mixture of variables to organize for success. All right, thank you, everybody. I hope we can get some of that feedback back into this paper.